Today's episode is going to be a contest recap, and we're going to be covering the 1976 World Amateur Bodybuilding Championship, also more famously known as the Mr. Universe. This is actually the first year the IFBB was moving away from Universe in the title, but before we talk about the big name change, I kind of want to paint the picture a little and leading up to the show. With the 76 Olympia held in Columbus just a month prior, the IFBB was making major changes throughout the entire year. They had recently partnered with the AAU, and they had over 90 countries represented in the federation. The IFBB had gone completely global and was bigger than ever at this point. Cut to November 5th, 1976, Montreal, Canada. The day prior to the Universe, the IFBB held their 7th International Congress of the International Federation of Bodybuilders. Along with the president, Ben Weider, there was some major players in the bodybuilding world present that day, like Vice President Tom Minichiello, General Secretary Winston Roberts, Committee Chairman Arnold Schwarzenegger, and so many more. There was actually 33 countries present at the Congress, so unfortunately I'm not going to be able to list all the delegates' names because we'd be here forever. But one name that did stick out to me was Marcel de la Saubonnière. I hope I got that right. He was the president of the Canadian Olympic Committee at the time. I think this man's presence here is very important because not only was the competition being held in the same city as the recent Olympics, but Ben Weider, along with the rest of the IFBB, was looking for Olympic recognition from the IOC. Now, I read a few different articles, one in an Ironman magazine, saying the name change was that there was no more confusion between NABA and the Weider show, but I'm not buying that. At this point in time, there's so many different federations with the same title names that I really don't think that was an issue. But major changes were made the day of Congress. Probably their biggest change was the class system. From this show forward, all competitors will be broken into weight classes instead of the traditional height categories. So replacing the standard 3 height classes are going to be these 3 weight groups. We've got lightweight, and that is up to and including 75 kilos or 165 pounds. Middleweight, up to and including 90 kilos, and that's around 198. And heavyweight is anything above that. Now, along with the class change came a new rule: no overall title winners. Just like in the Olympics, all amateur bodybuilding championships now would have weight class winners only. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't really like the idea of a 3-way tie. I prefer seeing who the judges think the best of the best really is. And I'm actually not the only one to think that. Bodybuilding fans and competitors at the time were against the change. Even the previous Mr. Universe title holder, Ken Waller, who had famously won in South Africa, wrote an article about how he didn't like the name change and felt like it was unfair to the competitors. So I guess Ken Waller wasn't so bad of a guy after all. Anyway, let's get back to the Congress. A few other things addressed were that prejudging will no longer be closed off to the public. Also, at the end of the public presentation of each category, there shall be a pose down between the top 3 finalists. The pose down will consist of 6 compulsory poses that we're all familiar with. You've got front double bicep, front lat spread, side chest, side tricep, back double bi, and back lat spread. Anyway, I could continue on for hours talking about the Congress, from tanning lotion being acceptable to use up to a day prior of competition, or how Serge Nubret was banned for life in the IFBB. Now, I know this is a video about the 1976 Mr. Universe, but I've got to address this. So, in a recent video I did about the 77 AAU America, I read that Nubret was scheduled to actually guest pose that evening at the show, but for some reason, last minute, he got fired, and the only thing I could find was that the AAU and IFBB had a meeting and said that he was doing an expose on the IFBB, and that's why he was fired. But something, it seemed like there was something else. And with a little more research, going back further, reading some old issues of Muscle Builder, I actually found many articles about Serge and even acknowledging how he was the vice president of IFBB Europe. So what the hell happened? How do you go from not only working alongside the Weeders, but also competing at their most prestigious show just the year prior to all of a sudden you're banned for life? Well, the more digging and reading I did, I found the answer. And of course, I found this information in an article written by bodybuilding's most outspoken competitor turned journalist, and that was Rick Wayne. And I guess I'll just get right to it. According to Rick Wayne, Serge Nubret got on everyone's bad side because of a foreign film he did. And it seems it wasn't just any old film, it was an adult film. So I guess after the Weeders found out, they severed all ties with Nubret. And I don't agree with their decision, but I guess their reasoning must have been, this looks bad for us, this looks bad for the sport. And while they're trying to get Olympic recognition, they panicked. And I don't know, different times. Anyway, enough bureaucracy. Let's get on to the show. It's Saturday morning, November 6th, 1976, Montreal, Canada. Several buses carrying 50 of the world's top bodybuilders pull up to the Claude Robillard Center. I thought it was actually very interesting that Winston Roberts picked this location for the competition as opposed to the traditional theater setting. The IFBB went with more of an athletic aesthetic by choosing an Olympic arena. In the center of the track and field armory, they had placed a raised platform for all the competitors to stand on. 65 feet behind the platform, there were large hanging nets with banners for big sponsors like YoPlay and Vic Tanny's gyms. Again, not a lot of pizzazz with this show, and definitely had the amateur athletic vibe, which I think is kind of cool. And 60 feet to the right of the stage, in plain view of the audience and judges, was the warm-up area, otherwise known as the pit, for competitors to pump up. I thought this is kind of interesting, making that like a public display. As a competitor, I don't know if I'd really like that for people to be able to see you, and I don't know. But what I found that was most interesting was that this competition was actually televised on ABC's Wide World of Sports. And sadly, I couldn't find any footage or information on it besides the fact that it was broadcasted on February 19th, 1977. Anyway, let's get on to prejudging. With 50 competitors and a show that lasted for over 11 hours, I couldn't possibly name everyone and go into complete detail. And I know what you're thinking, 11 hours, what the hell? But prejudging took 7 hours and the night show was 4, and that was mainly due to Mr. Canada being a co-promotion of the show. Yeah, so instead of me droning on for a while mispronouncing names, I'm just going to list the top 6 competitors from each weight class. But a few names I do want to share with you are the judges for this competition. First, we have Frank Burwash from Australia, Sid Pukalo from Canada, Mustafa Hevzi from Egypt, Franco Fassi from Italy, Bill Drake from the USA, Lloyd Lewis from Wales, Farouk Kasim from Iraq, and the reserve judges were Alex Baczynski from Czechoslovakia and Tom Ortega from the Philippines. Okay, let's begin with the lightweights. With 11 overall competitors in the class, there was a 3-way tie for 6th place. First, we have Jeff Alexander from Wales. Also coming in 6th was Nicholas Kemp of Belgium, who is actually over 40 years old here. And also coming in 6th was Argentina's Rogelio Montenegro. Coming in 5th place was Bernard Seely of Barbados with 163 points. In 4th was Renato Bertagna of Italy with 166 points. Okay, down to the top 3. Coming in 3rd with 173 points was Austria's Adolf Zinger. And just from pictures alone, this 38-year-old house painter looks like he should have been in a heavier weight category. The illusion that his upper body is casting is pretty interesting, but his legs were definitely his weakest point. And actually, in one of the articles I read, it stated that he possibly could have placed higher if he wasn't seen by the crowd and judges swigging a 26-ounce bottle of scotch in plain sight. Anyway, coming in 2nd place was Danny Padilla from the U.S., and it's pretty clear from all the photos here that Danny is carrying much more muscle than the year prior, but sacrificed his cuts for the mass. I had read in an article that Padilla himself wasn't taking his diet too serious up until at least 4 weeks out. Another thing I had read was that Padilla was pretty pissed off with Dennis Stallard, and Stallard was a disciplinarian that was coordinating the judges and directing the bodybuilders, from the side to the platform. And actually, Stallard is the chairman of the judging committee, so he's not just some Joe Blow up there. He's actually somebody deeply entrenched in the IFBB. And at one point, while Padilla was going through mandatory poses, Stallard called out for a front double bicep, followed by a back double bicep. And as Padilla turned around to hit the pose, Stallard said, "No, no, no, front lat spread," and that pissed me off. Now, I'm sure you could say that maybe this was just a miscommunication, but I don't know. From what I'm reading, Stallard seemed to be a bit of a hard-on. While fans would cheer for Padilla to flex harder on his abs, this guy Stallard steps off the platform to yell at the audience. He's yelling at the crowd. And thankfully, former Mr. Olympia, Arnold Schwarzenegger, was there, and he actually made a goof of it to lighten the mood. But anyway, let's go on to the lightweight champion. Coming in first place was the 23-year-old phenom out of Cairo, Egypt, and that was none other than Muhammad Makawe. With 192 points, Makawe was the clear winner. Incredible definition and excellent posing. Makawe swept the entire class. The only negative thing I had read was that he had small traps and small calves, but obviously they weren't a factor here. Another thing I had read was Makawe's relaxed poses were far from that. Actually, in between each pose, Makawe was so tensely flexing that his body was visibly shaking. And actually, our friend Dennis Stallard even addressed it during the show. And let's be honest, nobody's really standing relaxed. There's always a little bit of tension going on. You're flexing just a little bit. But regardless, Makawe's condition was spot on, and his posing was described as flawless. He later on explained that before the competition, he stayed in his hotel room to practice posing. He would actually make small drawings of different poses to pick from as preparation. Okay, on to the middleweight class. With 19 competitors, this class was the second largest, but definitely the most competitive of the three. I guess the most notable thing to point out in this class is that the United States had 2 competitors in the category, as opposed to 1 competitor in each weight class. And these 2 competitors had rumors circling around that they were the contenders for the title, and they were none other than Robbie Robinson and Mike Metzer. Now, from the looks of it, either one of these guys could have passed for a heavyweight. And after carving up on ice cream, layer cake, and strawberries the day before the show, Robbie Robinson actually weighed 212 pounds on stage. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out before we go on. So coming in 6th place for the middleweight class, we have Loftus Roach of Barbados with 168 points. Coming in 5th place and earning the Most Improved Bodybuilder of the Year award was Walter Bubenkek with 172 points. He was from Austria. Coming in 4th place was the 1975 Mr. Europe, and that was Peter Stack from Czechoslovakia. With 173 points, Stack walked away with not only 4th place, but Best Poser as well. Coming in 3rd place with 183 points from Turkey was Ahmet İnanlı. Ahmet was definitely the most conditioned competitor in the class. Actually, according to a quote I read by Padilla, was that Ahmet and certain other competitors would ramp up their smoking habits just for the cuts. Anyway, Ahmet wasn't too happy with his placing, but I think it was the correct decision because he wasn't as heavily developed as these next 2 competitors. In 2nd place with 185 points was the rising American champion Mike Metzer. According to some articles I read, Metzer was definitely in the running for 1st place with his massive triceps and incredible calves, but his biggest drawback was his stomach. Even here, in 1976, people were acknowledging that Metzer sometimes had a gut when he hit certain poses. But anyway, on to 1st place. With 188 points, Robbie Robinson from the United States took 1st in the middleweights. Heading into the competition, Robinson was the clear favorite. He even had said to himself that he knew he was going to win because the year prior in South Africa, he had actually lost to Ken Waller. So many people had thought he was kind of, next in line. Not to mention, he had recently, just a month earlier, at the Mr. International title in Columbus, won it. But politics and titles besides, Robinson deservedly took first place in this category. Okay, finally on to the heavyweights. Now, from every magazine I used for my research, they all said the same exact thing. The heavyweights were the weakest class. But you be the judge. With 20 competitors in total, our top 6 start with South Africa's Chris Kaiser placing 6th with 165 points. Coming in 5th was the local favorite from Canada, Gerald Popowski, with 166 points. Okay, now 4th place is actually a little bit confusing because I've gotten several different names and countries of origin for this competitor. So, according to an article written by Jack Neary in Muscle Builder, 4th place was Abbas Karim from Iraq with 167 points. But in Robert Schwab's article featured in Ironman magazine, his name is only listed as Karan from Iran. I kind of hit a dead end until I found this magazine that was actually covering the 77 Amateur Asian Bodybuilding Championship, where this same competitor won his weight class. But again, we have another name listed as Aziz Madloum. Very confusing. I'm not sure if things got lost in translation, but anyway. 3rd went to the show's tallest competitor, Karl Kainrath of Austria, with 175 points. He definitely looked good, but he did not carry the same amount of mass as our next 2 competitors. 2nd place went to the recent Mr. Western Hemisphere, and that was Darcy Beckles of Barbados. Now, I don't know, but according to some things I read, people disagreed with him finishing in 2nd, and I have to agree myself. I think out of the entire class, Beckles was the most symmetrical competitor with size to back it up. But it wasn't enough according to the judges. He ended up scoring only 177 points. Now, finally, coming in first place with 188 points was Roger Walker of Australia. The 27-year-old Air Force vet put on a significant amount of size from his previous showing at the Universe. But with that size, he sacrificed his lines and especially in his legs, as you can see. And now here are the overall team scores. The United States came in first place with 17 points. 2nd went to Austria with 10 points. Barbados in 3rd with 8 points. 4th was a tie between Egypt and Australia with 7. And Turkey finished in 5th with 4 points. Well, that about wraps it up for the World Amateur Bodybuilding Championship. But before we go, I'd like to address these 2 things. Like I had said earlier, the 1976 Mr. Canada was also taking place during this 11-hour extravaganza. And now, as always with a good bodybuilding show, this one was no different when it came to guest posing. And that evening, Boyarco, Lou Ferrigno, and the 1976 Mr. Olympia, Franco Colombo, all guest posed. Anyway, after the show concluded, all the winners felt the same in not feeling satisfied with an overall winner. But I'd like to hear from you guys what you think. If you had to pick an overall winner for this show, who would it be? Anyway, if you'd like more information about this competition or just classic bodybuilding content in general,